Todd inviting us to have a voice at the table here and talk a little bit about our partnership and things that we're doing with Quail Forever and Pheasants Forever on the national scale, and then in the partnership in Iowa, and kind of highlight that as to how we're getting more work accomplished with less people, less money, doing more with less. By the time I left the Missouri Department of Conservation, they were not doing more with less. They were pretty much doing everything with nothing. And they get to that point, where you just don't have a lot of funding and there's not a lot happening, and how are you gonna, how do you see, the light? Is it an oncoming train, or is it really, quail recovery happening for us? And one of the ways that we're really working hard is working with our partnerships. And so this is what we're gonna talk about today, is the partnerships that we've developed and how we're getting quality quail habitat on the ground. And maybe it will move forward. I am hitting the correct button. Okay. All right, that's a quote from Dave Nomsen. Now, many of you know Dave Nomsen works out of our governmental affairs. He works in Washington, D.C. And if that man believes that there's room for conservation on every farm and ranch in the country, and he's been in D.C. for so many years, then I have to believe it too. We all know that probably every farm and ranch in the country, and certainly every one in our quail country, could probably use a good wildlife management plan. And it's the goal of our organization to work with our partners and to get that conservation on the ground where it makes the difference. What we've done since 1982, Pheasants Forever has 130,000 members, 611 chapters in 29 states. And in 2005, we formed Quail Forever as, some way to help stem the loss of our quail. We have a little over 13,000 members, 135 chapters in 26 states, and that will soon change this week to 137 chapters in 27 states. We'll be starting new chapters in Arkansas. We'll also be revitalizing chapters that we've got in Louisiana, and we're doing some work now in the Southeast that we hadn't previously been doing. So we're really hoping to expand the habitat work that's being accomplished on the ground in the Southeast with some partnership positions there. So our combined impact and this is just last year, $53.8 million invested from chapters and from our partners, 13,000 projects, and a little over 460,000 acres for wildlife. A lot of that in the quail range, and a lot of that quality wildlife habitat that we put on the ground for upland birds. In the first 25 years of our existence as an organization, we put 5 million acres on the ground. Can anybody guess what we've done in the last 5 years? If you look in your sheets, you can tell how many acres we're at now. Okay, so another 5 million. So it took us almost 25 years to put the first 5 million on the ground, and it's only taken us another 5 or 6 years to put another 5 million on the ground. Why is that? Private land biologist, very good. Good answer, right in the back of the room. That is totally true. Partnerships and local delivery is how we get things done. Our chapters keep 100% of what they make. They do send their memberships back to our national office. Other than that, they control where their funding is spent, where their dollars that they make at a banquet is spent. We have a Forever Shooting Sports program, working a lot with the Potter Fields out of Columbia, Missouri, in their partnership and trying to get more kids outdoors. We have a national emphasis on our conservation delivery, so we have a presence in Washington, D.C., and right now with Dave Nomsen just finishing up his stint in Washington, D.C. for us, we have Jim English, and we'll be hiring a second governmental affairs person to work on farm bill issues, because that seems to be, as a private lands biologist myself for so many years, and so many of you I know actually get so much joy out of actually turning habitat into quail. One stroke of the pen in DC can do millions of acres for us, whereas a biologist on the ground, can do a couple thousand a year at best. So we're really working hard to make sure that stroke of the pen says the right thing for us in conservation. We work awfully hard on that in Washington, D.C. In Georgia and Florida, we finally got a position going on down there. They're working with the State Wildlife Agency and Tall Timbers and partnering to do some habitat projects. and to do some research in that area. So we're finally making a move down there. Andy Edwards out of Tennessee is working for us again for Quail Forever and helping us build chapters and build that infrastructure we need to put some dollars on the ground to get those private land positions going. So what I wanted to show you, I wanted to talk to you about our Farm Bill wildlife biologists and where they're located. We call them either Farm Bill wildlife biologists or coordinating wildlife biologists. And we've got them located in a lot of different places. I'm going to ask you a couple. This is my part where I want you guys to tell me why those positions are there. Who knows? What are we working on here?
Sage grouse.
Sage grouse initiative, exactly. Okay, so what are we doing down here? Lesser prairie chicken initiative. And then here, that's where my forte is. And then up into here, over into Kansas. A lot of the rest of those south of I-80 are working on quail projects. So we've got a lot of our biologists, a lot of our time and effort is spent on working with our quail biologists and trying to get quality quail habitat on the ground. But we do get involved in initiatives with NRCS on a larger scale, like the Sage Grouse Initiative. That's been one that has really put a lot of habitat on the ground. And those partnership positions, you know, they involve agencies. You know, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is a partner for us. NBTC is a partner for us in a lot of places. We work with a lot of different groups, and what makes it happen is all the partnerships that we have, and you know, the positive responses. Everybody gets, you know, put a little bit into the program, and we get a lot out of it. This is what we look like with a number of biologists. We have 111 right now. We will be hiring more. We have a lot of goals in a lot of different states, but Iowa often tells us, our Iowa staff often tell us that Iowa drives the bus for conservation in Pheasants Forever range, and that 11 Farm Bill wildlife biologists, they're third in the nation for the number of biologists we've got. You would expect Minnesota to be a high number, and Nebraska's always been a highly functioning partner, the Nebraska Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever chapters. I'm going to show you this slide. This is broken up into what we call our regions in the organization. Don't worry about the little ones. I'm going to show you a bigger one here next. So in the eastern region, the total acres we've impacted in our last fiscal year was 70,159 acres. A lot of that is on CRP, as you'll see. So 3,400 landowner contacts in our east region. And these are contacts that are Farm Bill wildlife biologist related, not chapter related. So I'm just giving you the information on these Farm Bill biologist partnership positions. So in the west region, where I said we're working with the Sage Grouse Initiative, we've got 364,000 total acres on the ground last year, with 1,844 landowner contacts. So obviously they have a little bit bigger pieces of property than we deal with on the east. The south region, of which Missouri is a part, in my home state, we've put 293,000 acres on the ground in the last year, 106,000 of that on CRP, the working lands being a lot of our grazing lands that we're working on as well. 6,600 landowner contacts last year, along with our Farm Bill wildlife biologists and coordinating biologists. In the north region, and Iowa's a part of the north region, 10,492 landowner contacts, 270,000 total acres, and 133,000 of that on CRP ground. In Iowa, we're still compiling the data. You know, we just finished the fiscal year, but it looks like we're going to be a little over 35,000 acres impacted by our Farm Bill wildlife biologists just this year in Iowa. And those partnership positions, you just can't say enough about them. They bring everybody together. Iowa has the distinct benefit of having more partners per Farm Bill wildlife biologist position than any other state in the nation. I think they have one position that's partnered with 12 entities that put funding into that Farm Bill wildlife biologist position. So that's a bear of a headache to try and keep those dollars separate, but they certainly know how to develop partnerships in the state. Our chapter impacts, the gentleman in the back mentioned the Reload Iowa program. That's been a big program for Pheasants Forever, trying to minimize the impact of the habitat losses we've had and really try and put more habitat quality on the ground and get kids outdoors. Since 1985, there's 103 Pheasants Forever and 2 Quail Forever chapters in the state of Iowa. That's an awful lot. They have 1 per county. I believe there's 1 county missing a chapter right now as we speak, but I think somebody's working on that one today. 561,000 acres of nesting cover, 10 million shrubs and trees for winter cover, improved over 61,000 acres of CRP in the state. They restore wetlands, and then they work at land acquisitions, which is something different. In Missouri, where I worked, we don't work in land acquisition much at all, but in Iowa, here's the way it works with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. The chapters will fundraise, they will find the money, they will help find the willing seller, and then they will buy the property or partner to buy the property and then turn it over to the Iowa DNR, and the Iowa DNR manages it for public access. So that's how we work with most of our land acquisitions that our chapters work on. And they've permanently protected through easements 85,638 acres of public habitat. IowaPF.net is a good site to go to, get a little more information on what's happening in Iowa. And I'll show you a little bit about the Reload Iowa campaign as well. So I've got one example here. Eric Sistema is one of the Farm Bill wildlife biologists, and he worked on a project of the whole wildlife management area. Partnered with IDNR, Field and Stream, and the Mahaska County Conservation Board. They did all kinds of plantings and wildlife habitat, created habitat there for quail, and it's kind of a quail-centric area that he was working with. And he said they've seen responses immediately on their quail numbers and are already starting to see birds come back. Because when we do any kind of woody cover work, it seems like in the Midwest, we almost immediately see quail responses. They just seem to come out of the woodwork and immediately respond to edge feathering, shrubby headquarters, anything like that. And so this is one example of an area. The Field and Stream part of it, this actually was chosen as a conservation hero for a day. So the Field and Stream folks flew a team out and videoed the whole thing and got a lot of press there for the quail habitat work they're doing. And we did a similar one in Missouri as well this last year on a quail project. So we're trying to partner and get the word out using our marketing techniques that they may be, we have, but there's one example here in Iowa of a management project with a lot of partners that's worked out really well for the quail habitat in the area. Some of the concerns that we have as wildlife biologists and as Farm Bill biologists and just as an organization, we'd really like to see a development of some later seed mixes. We seem to be putting things on a little too heavy. We don't need those seed mixes to be that heavy in a lot of cases, and quail certainly do not need some of these heavier seed mixes. We'd like to have a CRP practice and work on some things for grazing lands. We don't really have much management for our grazing lands, many opportunities for producers to mitigate that income that they get off of that field if they're switching over to native long season grasses, for example. And so we'd really like to help develop something like that on the national level. We're going to find some new ways to maximize the productivity of our new biologists. Takes a little bit of time, as you might imagine, when you move into a NRCS office and you work for Pheasants Forever, and it just takes a little time to integrate into that office, and for those partnerships to be effective. As they work here in Iowa, Kelly works very closely with the Farm Bill wildlife biologist, and they're invited to the staff meetings. And as you might imagine, it's different in every state. But NRCS has been a great partner for us, and we would just like to find some ways to integrate those biologists a little faster, have them hit the ground running a little bit quicker when they get hired on. So we're working on that. I'll be working on that as part of my a topic for the Conservation Leadership Institute that I'll be attending this year. And we'd also like to see more fire. Who doesn't want more fire? Apparently some people don't. Not a biologist, obviously. We want more fire. We want more fire in the landscape for quail, and we want to make it easier. Having lunch with Reggie yesterday, discussing the requirements for fire. In Missouri, the requirement for prescribed burning, if you want to go out and burn a field for quail, is to walk out, light the match, and burn the field for quail. We do not need to have a burn plan. We're not required to have anything. So, boy, we'd sure like to see some. restrictions go away that other states have that limit them from the use of prescribed fire. So we work on that kind of as an organization. And so here's what we'd like to see in the future. We want to sustain our partnership where things are working well. We want to grow in some of these new landscapes, and the Southeast is particularly one I think we're interested in a little more growth, certainly in working with quail. We have a national NRCS partnership template now that's been signed, giving us access to vehicle use, computers. It's just really nice to get a national template signed. And then we want to work more with agriculture as well. That's one thing that we'd like to see happen. We have some pretty positive relationships with agriculture, but there's so much opportunity in the Farm Bill and in other larger ag commodity issues where we can really pull in some dollars and make some differences for wildlife. So I'm going to end with just a few slides that I'm just going to go through real quick of some different projects that are happening across the range of the Quail Forever, where we're working with kids. This is a youth dove hunt. We're partnering with the Missouri Department of Conservation, National Wild Turkey Federation to get new hunters and youth outdoors. That's a Facebook page there if some don't recognize it. We have one biologist who will not join Facebook, but we're going to force him into it. This is actually his project, a pollinator project. Right last year we did 10 projects. The first year 10, then last year 20. We've got 60 projects planned where we have local school kids come out and plant pollinator projects. Then we work with them in the next couple of years to go out and monitor monarchs and use it as an outdoor classroom. And our chapters have really enjoyed that. A coloring contest up in Iowa, some youth rabbit hunting, hunter safety. We try to get the predators as well while we're out there. Get those kids hooked on coon hunting. And then I'm going to end here with the next slide. This is a CSP hunt we did in the Boot Hill, Missouri on the last week of the season, last 2 days of the season here. Had a great hunt, a lot of birds, a lot of good habitat down there using CSP. And I'll end on this one. One of the things that we're doing is working with focal areas, with NBCI focal area, the SIP project, and we're trying to pass that information on to other states. So we had a lot of biologists come out from Nebraska, landowners, and had a focal area workshop, talk to them about the monitoring we're doing and the things we're accomplishing in Missouri related to that. So it was what we called an NBCI focus area workshop, and it turned out real well this year. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end, because I know we've got a lot going on. There's just so many other things that the organization is doing, but there's the monitoring results from that NBCI first year in the spring. And I'll end with that slide. You can look at it yourself. It's pretty self-explanatory. Thank you, folks.